Hi, welcome back to Kingdom Portions here on Kingdom in Context. I'm Sean Griffin, and I'm accompanied by my incredible and lovely wife and co-host.
Hey guys, I'm Lindsay. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, sweetie.
Shabbat Shalom, love.
Thank you for joining us, folks. We love doing this, and we just appreciate you for joining us while we do this, because we get to read the scriptures, and we're excited about it. Every week we're excited about it, because this stuff was kind of ignored growing up for me. You know, like a lot of the churches that you go to, they don't really dig into Genesis through Deuteronomy. And that's what we're doing here. We'll call them Kingdom Portions because we're trying to show to you, the viewer, how all this information is relevant to the gospel of the kingdom of God that all the prophets, including the Messiah, preached, as well as our life in the kingdom of God after the resurrection. And so there's all kinds of things layered inside of Genesis through Deuteronomy that indicate to us not only what it's going to be like, but how people are going to behave, how the Father and the Son are going to behave. It's a beautiful, beautiful storyline. So we feel like it's probably literally the foundational concepts of how to understand the rest of Scripture. So thanks for joining us. If you haven't already, you are welcome to join us also on Saturday nights, where we do a special show with our buddy from Hanging on His Words YouTube channel, Ken Heidebrecht. We do a special show called Honor of Kings, and that shows where we look at the books that were taken out of the American canon over the past several hundred years. And also, we look at some books that were never even included in the American canon, but they were put in other biblical canons around the world. So that show is called Honor of Kings. We have a lot of fun doing it, testing the hidden books of the Bible. You're welcome to join us on Saturday nights for that. And on Sundays, I do a special show called Torah Apologetics, where I actually show apologetics through the lens of Torah itself, because that's what the Apostle Peter would suggest that we do. That's our foundation, so we don't get tripped up on things and take things out of context. So please come join us on Sunday nights for Torah Apologetics. We're finishing up our series on Galatians this week. So would you like to tell them about our social media?
Yes. So we have a Facebook group. It's called Kingdom in Context / Hanging on His Words Study Group. And we just find Facebook to be a more user-friendly app. We struggle with YouTube not always sending us notifications for new comments or comment threads underneath comments. So if you want a place to interact with us and be a little more likely to get a response from one of us, you can join us both on our regular profiles on Facebook, we're on there, and then also in the study group where other people who watch the channel gather there for online fellowship. So. Yeah,
it's a good place.
Yeah.
You're welcome to come join us there. And also, we have a new social media outlet. We're actually having a podcast outlet on SoundCloud. So if you have ever used SoundCloud or are familiar with that, go find us, Kingdom on Context on SoundCloud. I'll have the link to it in the description of this video as well. And this is where we're uploading audio versions a little bit every day. We've got a lot of videos at this point.
Yeah.
So it takes me a little bit every day to upload them. But I'll be uploading all the current ones plus our past ones. So you can go in there and just put it on autoplay if you want and just listen while you're driving in the car or working at work or doing chores around the house. And it's just all audio. So welcome to join us over there. Also, people have asked us in the past, they like what we're doing, they want to see us continue to do this, and they want to support us for what we're doing because they feel blessed by it. So they've asked us how they can actually donate to us. We have those links in the description below. There's a PayPal, a Patreon if you want to do like monthly donations, or just a regular P.O. box for people that want to use checks. And all this is we just try to emphatically remind folks that this is not a tithe. We're not Levite priests. We're not ministering in a temple. That had a specific context to it. All this would be is just a simple love donation. You like what we're doing. It's blessing you, and you want to in turn bless us. You want to see us keep doing this. And that's one of the ways it happens. So it's built off the principles of Matthew 10 and 2 Corinthians 9, just the idea that the teacher, the worker is worth his wage, so to speak. And Yeshua sent out the disciples to preach the gospel of the kingdom of God, which is what we do here. And he just basically told them, don't take any money with you. If your message blesses them, in turn, they'll bless you. So I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Please go read the chapter. That's the general premise, and that's all we stand on. So we appreciate your prayerful consideration of that, and those links are in the description below. So is there anything else that we didn't mention? Is there anything
I think we
else?
covered it.
Okay, sweetie. Do you want to start with the first chapter, or am I doing this one this week?
You can start.
Okay. Must be some tough words in there.
No,
All right,
I
guys.
think we're pretty even this week, actually.
We're going to start.
Each.
Okay. We're going to start in Numbers 22, verse 2. So if you got your Bibles and you're following along, that's where we'll begin. Here in verse 2. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. So Moab was in great fear because of the people, for they were numerous, and Moab was in dread of the sons of Israel. Moab said to the elders of Midian, "Now this horde will lick up all that is around us, as the ox licks up the grass of the field." And Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of Moab at that time. So he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river, in the land of the sons of his people, to call to him, saying, "Behold, a people came out of Egypt. Behold, they cover the surface of the land, and they are living opposite of me. Now, therefore, please come, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I may be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you blessed is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed." So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination in their hand, and they came to Balaam and repeated Balak's words to him. He said to them, "Spend the night here, and I will bring back to you as the Lord may speak to me." And the leaders of Moab stayed with Balaam. And then God came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men with you?" And Balaam said to God, "Balak, the son of Zippor, the king of Moab, he sent word to me. Behold, there is a people who came out of Egypt, and they cover the surface of the land. Now come, curse them for me. Perhaps I may be able to fight against them and drive them out." And God said to Balaam, "Do not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed." So Balaam arose in the morning and said to Balak's leaders, "Go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you." The leaders of Moab arose and went to Balak and said, "Balaam refused to come with us." So then Balak again sent leaders, more numerous and more distinguished than the former. And they came to Balaam, and he said to him, "Thus says Balak the son of Zippor, let nothing, I beg you, hinder you from coming to me, for I will indeed honor you richly, and I will do whatever you say to me. Please come then, curse this people for me." And Balaam replied to the servants of Balak, "Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything, either small or great, contrary to the command of Yahweh my God. Now please, you also stay here tonight, and I will find out what else Yahweh will speak to me." God came to Balaam at night and said to him, "If the men have come to call you, rise up and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you shall you do." So Balaam arose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the leaders of Moab. But God was angry because he was going, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. Now he was riding on his donkey, and his two servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, the donkey turned off from the way and went into the field. But Balak struck the donkey to turn her back into the way. And then the angel of Yahweh stood in a narrow path of the vineyards, with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pressed herself to the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he struck her again. The angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn to the right or to the left hand. And when the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh, she laid down under Balaam. And so Balaam was angry and struck the donkey with a stick. And Yahweh opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to him, "Balaam, what have I done to you, that you have struck me these 3 times? And then Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you have made a mockery of me. If there had been a sword in my hand, I would have killed you by now." The donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life to this day? Have I ever been accustomed to do so to you?" And he said, "No." Then Yahweh opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of Yahweh standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed all the way to the ground. The angel of Yahweh said to him, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out as an adversary because your way was contrary to me. But the donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, I would surely have killed you just now and let her live." Balaam said to the angel of Yahweh, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the way against me. Now, then, if it displeases you, I will turn back." But the angel of Yahweh said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but you shall speak only the words which I tell you." So Balaam went along with the leaders of Balak. And when Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, which is on the Arnon border, at the extreme end of the border. And then Balak said to Balaam, "Did I not urgently send you to call to you? Why did you not come to me? Am I really unable to honor you?" So Balaam said to the king Balak, "Behold, I have come now to you. Am I able to speak anything at all? The word that God puts in my mouth, that I shall speak." And Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kiriath Buzot. And Balak sacrificed oxen and sheep and sent some to Balaam and the leaders who were with him. And then it came about in the morning that Balak the king took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal. He said he saw from there a portion of the people. Okay, so there it is, chapter 22, the famous Balaam, the prophet from Pethor, son of Beor, right? Where is that? Does anyone know where that is?
Yeah, we couldn't figure it out.
Well, we have some hints, right? We actually found out what we couldn't figure out was who he's a descendant of.
Right.
But we have some good ideas of where he came from, which it mentioned the land by the river. So we're thinking it's the Euphrates River, and we're thinking it is actually the area of Aram. It's called Aram Naharam. And it's actually near Haran, which is, if you guys remember back in Genesis, Haran was the brother of Abraham. And so this is where the descendants of Laban came from, which is where we get Rebecca, Isaac's wife.
Right.
So this is that whole family group up there. That's our best guess, is that was the lineage and the descendancy of where this guy came from, this Balaam cat. And that's why he knew God, was a prophet of God.
Right.
This guy's not an Israelite. I
Right.
hope you guys caught that, right? This guy's just not an Israelite at all, but he's already a prophet. He's already got angels showing up to him, giving him messages. He's doing, like we're going to see in the next chapter, he knows how to do sacrifices.
Right.
He's got angels showing up to him more for messages of God. He's got the angel of the Lord himself actually showing up to give him a message and talk to him. So this guy's definitely, he knows Torah.
Right.
He does. This is just a beautiful example that it kind of breaks through that common misunderstanding that God was only dealing with Israel and nobody else ever. But we got to remember, folks, like Abraham's just a few hundred years removed from Noah.
Right.
So Abraham's descendants and that whole generation, that, fourth and fifth generation of people, they were all alive when Shem was still alive. Shem lived, 500 years after the flood. Shem was Noah's best boy. Like, he was the one that was obedience. We believe he was the Melchizedek. He was the priest of the Most High God. So to be a priest, you're teaching the Torah. This is part of the deal. Like, you're a teacher of the people. Because you know it. So therefore you can
Right.
teach it as sound doctrine. And we got Eber. We got all the other kids. I can't remember all their names right now. Elam, Asher, all these other people.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually going to read about a couple of these people in a few chapters from now, 24. But the point I'm saying is, like, the scriptures, they do a kind of a spotlight focus on a certain people group coming through Abraham's descendants. But it doesn't go into like all the other peoples that were descendant of Noah that had literal influence from Shem,
Right.
who would have learned Torah as Noah was teaching Torah as he's getting off the boat in Jubilees chapter 7.
It's similar to most people thinking that Ishmael isn't a part of any kind of future rewards or anything like that. But if you read the story of Ishmael, it appears that he left, yes, but he continued to walk in righteousness.
That's right.
He comes back to bury Abraham.
Jubilees affirms this as well.
Right. So it's just that assumption of out of sight, out of mind type thing. But I mean, it makes sense because if this guy Balaam was some sort of a descendant of, Laban, that would explain why, as you're saying, that he would know these things about God, about the law, and things like that.
Because Rebecca was called a righteous woman.
Right, exactly.
To be called righteous means you're doing Torah. You've got to know it to be called. Like, the Father doesn't hand that term out for nothing. So the servant sent by Isaac to go find a bride, he found one with certain qualifications.
Right.
He wasn't just going to pick anybody, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just because she was, of
Pretty.
that family line or because
Yeah.
she was pretty or anything like that. But yeah, it was, an angel. It was God appointed, but
Yeah.
what he went looking for, the criteria wasn't just looks or family line.
That's right. Yeah. In fact, her drawing the water and taking care of the animals and being kind to a stranger is Torah.
Yeah.
So she had that heart exemplified of Torah. No wonder she's called righteous.
Right.
But the point is, she was taught that from somebody. And we got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob over here off doing something else in a different area. And people just assume that they're the only ones that knew God and knew, had any interaction of the truth, and that had God was doing anything with. But that's not true at all. Like we discussed last week, the scriptures tell us that there were covenants made with Esau for land. Right? As well as Lot's descendants, the Moabites and the Ammonites. Which is why they're not trying to attack those people, right? They're not, and they didn't want to attack Og and Sihon either, but those guys became the aggressors and they go at them, But so that's something that leads into my next statement, which is this king Balak, the king of Moab. He immediately sees the Israelites coming into his land, camped near the Jordan River in the plains of Moab in what was called the wasteland area, across from Jericho, and he just immediately thinks, "Oh, they're going to try to take me out."
Yeah.
Right? And so he tries to get Balaam, this prophet, to come in and curse them. So there's a couple things here. One, to me, like, if you're a king of a land and you govern people and you see another people group that took out other stronger people groups that were your neighbors, and now you're afraid of these sojourners traveling through your land, like, go send an envoy of peace to them. right?
Well, that's why he's trying to attack them from afar.
Yeah.
He's trying
Yeah.
to do something about it, but obviously it's in the wrong heart, because blessed are the peacemakers, right?
Yeah,
so that would be the right thing to do, but he's still going about it in a way that, keeps him separated from any danger.
If I could use a modern term, he's trying to use Balaam to curse the Israelites as if it's a drone strike from afar.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to get his hands dirty. He can just mess with them. So, and then that brings us to Balaam.
Right.
Why this guy, right? Like we just said, clearly this guy's a prophet of Yahweh. You don't get that title for nothing. You don't just suddenly one day wake up and decide to be a prophet for Yahweh, right?
You don't give yourself the title either.
Yeah, that's right. And this guy's having angelic interactions. So at some point, this guy was faithful and proved himself to Yahweh to be in this position, and to the people of the region to think, oh, here's a dude whoever he blesses, they're blessed. Whoever he curses, they're cursed. Get that guy. That guy's got power. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's like, whatever in the following weeks, as we continue to discuss Balaam and some of the bad decisions he makes later in his life, and how Israel has to deal with him, in this circumstance, in this portion we're going to talk about this week, he's already proved himself to God to be faithful. Now, people can make mistakes at any point in their life.
Yeah. Don't
get us wrong. But at least in this particular portion right here, Balaam has proved himself to get to this spot of being a prophet and to be recognized by the pagan nations of the areas around him as someone with power of Yahweh. And that's something that means these pagan nations knew about Yahweh.
Yeah.
So guys, think about what's going on here. Like the region, how do I say this right? The geopolitical, theological, mindset of the region here, them worshiping their Baal false gods on these high places, but yet they know that there's this prophet in the land whom they respect enough to ask for his help, that he's worshiping this God named Yahweh. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just think that there's a lot more going on, and the reason I'm saying this is because to me this is a beautiful story of the Father, just a glimpse of the Father showing that he can reach other people anytime he wants.
Right, because the central theme of this story is about the gospel of the kingdom and the Messiah that comes to bring us into that kingdom. And so, of course, like any good author, he would focus it on that line that seed of the promise is going to come through. But as we can see, there's other storylines going on. We're just not privy to them the whole time.
That's right, yeah. And now some of these storylines are mixing together. Right. At this specific moment in time. We got the descendants of Abraham mixing with the descendants of Abraham's brother, possibly, and definitely the descendants of Lot.
Yeah.
Right? So we've got all these, that we haven't seen Lot since what? Genesis 21? Yeah. Something like that. So,
brief walk-on roll.
That's right. So now we're tying together some of these extended storylines and with the Father, but the point is that as we read in, I think it's Deuteronomy 2 and 3, the Ammonites, they had already been fighting giants out of the land in their region to establish their region in this area, same as the Moabites. Right. So the Moabite, and this is in Deuteronomy 2 and chapters 3, where it talks about the giants they had to fight. The Ammonites used to call, they were the Anakim. They were also called the Rephaim, and the specific name the Ammonites gave them was the Zamzumim. It's kind of fun to say. And then the Moabites, speaking of the same group of giants, used to call them by a different name with their language called the Emim. And so not as fun to say. But the point is, they had already battled these guys and established territory in that land, even though a lot of people know that Sihon and Og were giants as well, living close by. Because Og is mentioned to have a bed that was 13 feet in length, and he was a giant. So the point is, these guys, there's a whole other narrative going on that we don't get privy to in this storyline. But now these are kind of like, they're kind of running against each other. So we're getting new characters introduced here that have been a part of the story this whole time. And as we're going to read in future portions, the Reubenites, the sons of Reuben, sons of Manasseh, and I want to say the sons of Gad. I think those are the three, but definitely the Reubenites. In Joshua 13, they take over this area of Moab, and this is where they actually settle in. So, the donkey. There's a talking donkey, guys.
Yeah, and it's just like nothing for Balaam. It's like they just start having a conversation.
Balaam isn't surprised that this donkey's talking.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where, atheists, they run wild with this story, right? Because they love to mock it, they love to make fun of it. Oh, but guess what? there's this crazy book called Jubilees that claims that all the animals in the Garden of Eden used to be able to talk with mankind.
Well, not just that, but I guarantee you those atheists are at home talking to their dogs or their cats or whatever pet they have.
I'm just saying,
and
as
thinking
far
to
as
themselves, I know you understand me.
I'm talking about continuity of storyline,
Yes.
right? So this is where my wife and I have emphatically tried to show through many kingdom portions and many other videos, even our Honor of Kings show where we've tested the book of Jubilees on multiple occasions, to show how much it does line up with Scripture in so many ways. And the central narrative of the book of Jubilees claims that it was an angel speaking instructions to Moses on Mount Sinai. So little things like this just bring more validation to the book of Jubilees to be legitimate to what it claims, to be something that was actually information given to Moses by an angel on Mount Sinai during the moment 40 years earlier from what we're reading now, right? So, and here we've got nowhere in the American canon of 66 is there any mention of animals being able to speak with mankind.
Right.
And so specifically in the storyline, it tells us that the angel opened the donkey's mouth so that he could speak. Well, Jubilees claims that the animals, when they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve were kicked out, that all their mouths were closed.
Yeah.
So they no longer could speak with mankind.
So when you're talking to your dog or your cat and they look at you and you feel like, I know that they understand me, if only they could just speak English, I think they really can understand us to a certain extent.
Oh, absolutely. That's why we can train them. Absolutely. Absolutely. But what I'm saying is that's why if Balaam had this same information,
right.
if Balaam also passed down from Noah, passed down to Moses on Mount Sinai, this same core information, because remember, Moses had all the writings of Enoch, which many of them that we don't even have today.
Right.
And then all this same narrative is being shared from Shem down to Abraham, down to the descendants, reaffirmed at Mount Sinai with the covenant reaffirmed as it says it was to all the multitude of descendants that came out of Israel's lineage. It wouldn't be big information. Like,
right.
It wouldn't be a surprise if suddenly a donkey started talking to you.
Right.
And then an angel of the Lord showed up, because you would start to realize, I kind of already knew that was a thing in the past. And it would make sense in this moment if an angel who's representing the power of Yahweh was able to open their mouth so they could speak to me in this moment. So I just think that's, whether, people that hate the Bible, antagonists of the Bible, atheists of the Bible, they're going to find anything they can mock anyway.
Right.
But if you're trying to defend a story that seems as audacious and ludicrous as a donkey talking to a man, and even giving him history, by the way, he's like, I've been your donkey your whole life. Like, I've never done this to you. So this donkey's bringing up old stuff.
Right.
So that's hilarious to me. He's like, I've been good to you this whole time. Why have I ever done this? And I just think that that's interesting. Even the donkey is reasoning on a capacity to draw Balaam's mind out of his anger back to a calm state, which shows intelligence.
True.
Which is wild. But what I'm getting at is this whole thing is just more validation to the idea that all these people, they had the same story passed down to them from Noah and through the other descendants. So this is how you have a prophet of the Most High God who is interacting with angels, who's not surprised when a donkey starts talking,
right.
who the other nations respect to go and bless or curse people, and I just think it's wild. And then the Father actually tells him the same message. This angel that shows up to Balaam isn't reprimanding Balaam for being an imposter prophet, right, or being a false prophet. No, he says, no, I've blessed Israel. Don't curse him.
Yeah.
He doesn't say, and stop pretending to be a prophet, right?
Right.
Like he's honoring the prophet position of Balaam throughout this whole thing. And I just think it's fascinating. It's fascinating. So keep with us, guys. We're actually at the end of after we finish our initial portion, we go into our pairings. We're going to discuss what it means for Jubilees and Numbers chapter 22 to make this claim that animals can actually talk, and how it pertains to us during the millennial reign. So I'm excited. What sticks out to you further than this, Sweetie?
Just the fact that we've got the angel of the Lord here again, and he's the one speaking with Balaam, and at times it says God spoke to Balaam. So it's just further validation and proof of the way that the Father uses agency to accomplish his will on earth and to communicate with his prophets.
That's right. I've joked about this, but because the average person that's reading scripture, no one's ever taught about agency.
Right.
I've joked that I might need to add it as a tree on the context branch.
A branch on the context tree?
I meant to say that, yeah. A branch on the context tree. That's right. I'm because it seems to be like a huge idea that people just really need to understand how the Father uses his hierarchy, his authority that flows downward to his people, right?
Right.
And that's, it helps us understand the Messiah better too. So either way. But if there's nothing further, we'll jump to chapter 23 real quick.
All right.
And pick up the story.
Then Balaam said to Balak, "Build 7 altars for me here, and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me here." Balak did just as Balaam had spoken, and Balak and Balaam offered up a bull and a ram on each altar. Then Balaam said to Balak, "Stand beside your burnt offering, and I will go. Perhaps the Lord will come to meet me, and whatever he shows me I will tell you." So he went to a bare hill. Now God met Balaam, and he said to him, "I have set up the 7 altars, and I have offered up a bull and a ram on each altar." Then the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, "Return to Balak, and you shall speak thus." So he returned to him, and behold, he was standing beside his burnt offering, he and all the leaders of Moab. He took up his discourse and said, "From Aram Balak has brought me, Moab's king from the mountains of the east. Come curse Jacob for me, and come denounce Israel. How shall I curse whom God has not cursed? And how can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? As I see him from the top of the rocks, and I look at him from the hills, behold, a people who dwells apart, and will not be reckoned among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number the 4th part of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his." Then Balak said to Balaam, "What have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, but behold, you have actually blessed them." He replied, "Must I not be careful to speak what the Lord puts in my mouth?" Then Balak said to him, "Please come with me to another place from where you may see them, although you only see the extreme end of them, and will not see all of them, and curse them for me from there." So he took him to the field of Zophim, to the top of Pisgah, and built 7 altars, and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. And he said to Balak, "Stand here beside your burnt offering, while I myself meet the Lord over there." Then the Lord met Balaam, and put a word in his mouth, and said, "Return to Balak, and thus you shall speak." He came to him, and behold, he was standing beside his burnt offering, and the leaders of Moab with him. And Balak said to him, "What has the Lord spoken?" Then he took up his discourse and said, "Arise, O Balak, and hear. Give ear to me, O son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? Behold, I have received a command to bless, and when he has blessed, then I cannot revoke it. He has not observed misfortune in Jacob, nor has he seen trouble in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt. He is for them like the horns of the wild ox. For there is no omen against Jacob, nor is there any divination against Israel. At the proper time it shall be said to Jacob and to Israel, what God has done. Behold, a people rises like a lioness, and as a lion it lifts itself. It will not lie down until it devours the prey, and drinks the blood of the slain. Then Balak said to Balaam, "Do not curse them at all, nor bless them at all." But Balaam replied to Balak, "Did I not tell you, whatever the Lord speaks, that I must do?" Then Balak said to Balaam, "Please come, I will take you to another place. Perhaps it will be agreeable with God that you curse them for me from there." So Balak took Balaam to the top of Peor, which overlooks the wasteland. Balaam said to Balak, "Build 7 altars for me here, and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me here." Balak did just as Balaam had said, and offered up a bull and a ram on each altar.
Okay, thank you, sweetie.
You're welcome.
All right, 23. In case you guys had a question about the end of chapter 22, where it says they did sacrifices, and then Balak took the prophet Balaam to one of the high places so they could see a portion of the people. So that was a brief summary statement. This happens a lot in Hebrew writing, okay? And as we tried to emphatically explain last week, this happens a lot in the book of Numbers, where we've now transitioned in this portion of the book of Numbers to being information about the last part of this 40-year journey.
Right.
Okay, so it went from a lot of information about the second or third year of the 40-year journey, and now we're all the way to the end of that. You just have to find the context of what's going on to really discern that. It doesn't tell you exactly that. Just like at the end of 22, it doesn't exactly tell you where they're doing these feasts, these sacrifices with the oxen and the sheep, which happens before they go to this high place. But chapter 23 at the very beginning, then kind of backs up and explains, okay, and this is how Balaam did all these sacrifices on this plain, on this hill with a small hill or whatever it said. And then they went to the high places of Baal so they could take a look in the distance at the children of Israel encamped, which I think is interesting because, it's like, imagine all the children of Israel encamped, like how much room that would take up, and how they would be sprawled across the surface of the land, which is why they made these statements at the beginning of chapter 22 is like, they're covered over the surface of the land. They're going to lick up everything like an ox, eating grass in the field, So that's interesting. I guess they're worried about provisions in some regard.
Right.
But again, they could have just tried to make peace with them and say, hey, you guys plan on staying long? What's going on? Instead, they're just like, let's try to hurt them from a distance like cowards, So they're about to get theirs later. So it comes back on them. Also here in this chapter, we've got the king of Moab, this guy named Balak. He's king over a region. Okay, so there's other people groups inside this region. And some of these people groups are the Midianites, who we're going to see later at the end of this Torah portion in chapter 25, and all the bad stuff that goes down with the Midianites. But by the way, that's just another example of what we were talking about in the last chapter, about how there's other storylines from people we met back in Genesis that are still continuing to live and populate and thrive and do their own thing. Midian was a son of Abraham. Okay, so remember, Sarah dies. Abraham remarries a lady named Keturah. Abraham's like 126, and he's back out bacheloring, and he takes a second wife, and he marries this lady, has 6 kids with this lady at 126. So there's a commercial for vitality. And so one of those kids was Midian, and here's his descendants that are living in this region of Moab, which is on the on the east side of the Jordan. And what have they been doing all this time, right? So we're gonna read, but sadly they have not been following Yahweh.
Yeah.
So we've got Isaac. He has been, but they're all the other 5 sons born to Keturah. We don't know what's going on with them.
Right.
We don't know if some of them followed Yahweh or not. Could those be some of the descendants, the forefathers of Balaam himself? Possibly. If anyone knows in the comments, like you said, you already saw us kind of guess on where Balaam's parents came from, but if you know and you have any further research, please put it in the comments. But other than that, this whole concept is that the king of Balak, he doesn't seem to really understand where Balaam is getting his authority from, right? So he's thinking that, because if you read closely in the last chapter, the first time he sent the people to Balaam and tried to entice him to come back, he's like, I got something I want to pay you greatly and give you great riches to do this for me. And then Balaam's like, I can't go with you. I can only do what the Lord tells me to speak. The envoy, the emissaries, went back to the king of Moab and said, Balaam doesn't want to do this. So it's totally different. They didn't say Balaam's God won't let him do this. They say Balaam doesn't want to do this.
Right.
So there's a big difference in understanding and this is why I think he doesn't really get it. It's not Balaam the one that's speaking the curse and the blessing. It's Balaam being a conduit of agency to speak the cursing or the blessing only when it's approved by Yahweh.
Right.
So which kind of goes into why he starts doing all these random sacrifices on different hilltops.
Yeah, he keeps having Balaam, take him to different locations because he's thinking he's going to get a different answer if he just goes to a different location. I mean, if you think about it, like, people like him would be used to serving gods who take a bribe. So the Father has given his answer here already. He gave his answer before Balaam even left to go with Balak. But this guy is thinking he can, let's give more offerings. Let's go keep bribing him. And we know Yahweh is not one, he doesn't accept a bribe, and he's not a respecter of persons. He doesn't show partiality. So it's just interesting the kind of, difference in mindset that goes on with the pagan mindset, which, people who know my testimony, I used to be that kind of person who thought that way, that I could bribe the universe into being basically like my vending machine. And I would put in my little karma tokens and get whatever, my heart desired at the time. So it's interesting to now, from the fresh perspective of being a believer and having the Holy Spirit in me, to watch other people operate this way and to see totally what's going on. Like, oh, he's trying to put his little coins in the vending machine. And so it does show that some of the people in the regions had sounds like they had a proper fear of the Father. I guess I should say the God of Israel, because they may not have come to actually be in covenant with him.
Right.
But they knew not to mess with his children.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is not one who has found that wisdom yet.
Right.
And he's thinking that this is just another, low-level, small g God who will accept a bribe.
We actually see something like this in the prophets, in Isaiah and Ezekiel, Jeremiah, where they're reprimanding the evil prophets of Israel that were, remember, during the days when Israel, northern and southern kingdom, were in apostasy, worshiping the gods of Baal, just like this king of Moab. They had their own prophets run around prophesying blessing to the kings like Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and kings that were in rebellion against God's covenant and against the Father. They had their own prophets giving them tickling words for their ears and trying to give them false blessings, which is why the prophets had to call them out and saying those prophecies aren't going to come true at all, guys. Here's what the Father's really going to do to you. So same concept here, like she was saying. These pagan kings, you didn't like an answer that the god of Baal gave you? Well, go over to the hill where Ishtar is worshipped, and maybe you'll get a different answer from those priests and prophets. Or maybe go over to Shamash, to that hill where you worship to him. Maybe those priests will tell you a different story, because they're liars.
Yeah.
They're liars anyway. Like, they're listening to unclean spirits anyway, which is deceit. So, like, they're not going to give you a truthful answer anyway. So that's why we're going through the motions with all this stuff here in chapter 23.
Yeah.
Anything else in this chapter sticks out to you?
I think we probably covered everything.
Right. Well, I'll start with 24. So here in verse 1, when Balaam saw that it had pleased Yahweh to bless Israel, he did not go as at other times to seek omens, but he set his face toward the wilderness. And Balaam lifted up his eyes, and he saw Israel camping tribe by tribe, and the Spirit of God came upon him. He took up discourse, and he said, The oracle of Balaam the son of Beor, and the oracle of the man whose eye is opened, the oracle of him who hears the words of God, who sees the vision of the Almighty, falling down, yet having his eyes uncovered. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling place, O Israel, like valleys that stretch out, like gardens beside the river, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. Water will flow from his buckets, and his seed will be by many waters. His king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings him out of Egypt. He is for him like the horns of the wild ox. He will devour the nations who are his adversaries, and will crush their bones in pieces, and shatter them with his arrows. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion who dares rouse him? Blessed is everyone who blesses you, and cursed is everyone who curses you. Then Balak's anger burned against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. And Balak, the king of Moab, said to Balaam, I called you to curse my enemies, but behold, you have persisted in blessing them these 3 times. Therefore flee to your place now. I said I would honor you greatly, but behold, the Lord has held you back from honor. And Balaam the prophet said to Balak, Did I not tell your messengers whom you sent to me, saying, Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything contrary to the command of Yahweh, either good or bad, of my own accord. What Yahweh speaks, that I will speak. And now behold, I am going to my people. Come, and I will advise you what this people will do to your people in the days to come. He took up this discourse, and he said, Balaam took up his discourse and said, The oracle of Balaam the son of Beor, and the oracle of the man whose eye is opened, the oracle of him who hears the words of God, and knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, falling down, yet having his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come forth from Jacob, a scepter shall rise from Israel, and shall crush through the forehead of Moab, and tear down all the sons of Set. Edom shall be a possession. Seir, its enemies, also will be a possession, while Israel performs valiantly. One from Jacob shall have dominion, and will destroy the remnant from the city. And he looked at Amalek, and took up the discourse, and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his end shall be destruction. And he looked at the Kenite, and took up his discourse, and he said, Your dwelling place is enduring, and your nest is set in the cliff. Nevertheless, Kenite will be consumed. How long will Asher keep you captive? And then he took up his discourse and said, Alas, who can live except God has ordained it? But ships shall come from the coast of Shittim, and they shall afflict Asher and will afflict Eber, so they also will come to destruction. And then Balaam arose and departed and returned to his place, and the king of Moab, Balak, also went his way. All right, there's 24. Thoughts?
What did it say about the Spirit of God coming upon Balaam?
Yeah, that's pretty wild, isn't it?
Yes,
the
it is.
The Spirit of God.
I thought nobody had
Balaam.
the Spirit until the book of Acts, babe.
This is way before Acts 2. Didn't we read about Numbers chapter 11? The Spirit of God came upon the 70 elders.
Yes.
that encircled the tent of meeting.
Yeah.
And then some of it kind of like spilled over onto Eldad and Medad.
Right.
We still need to get those shirts.
I know.
Guys, the Spirit of God's active throughout the world all the
Yeah.
time. And for whomever is walking in the will of the Father, you got access to the Spirit of God. Depends on how he wants to dole it out to you.
Yeah, we have a greater outpouring of it because we have a perfect high priest up in the heavenly sanctuary. And since he's perfect and sinless and can perform the duties of atonement, that is why the outpouring of the Spirit is so much stronger, we see in the book of Acts at that time of Pentecost. But the Spirit was being brought down through that process of priestly duties all the way back probably to the time of Adam. So to say that nobody had the Spirit until that certain moment of time is to reveal a lack of understanding, first of all, of how his Spirit works, but also the priestly process that is involved in the presence of the Spirit being brought down.
I'm glad you mentioned that term, priestly process, because what have we been watching Balaam do this whole time?
Right.
He's doing sacrifices.
Yeah.
He's speaking with angels. He's now prophesying. Yes, he's called a prophet, but just like Nathan and Samuel and all these, Isaiah, Ezekiel, these other prophets, it's almost as if and this is where a lot of people theorize that they are the Melchizedek priesthood. I don't know if I totally buy that, but there's a lot of similarities there because Genesis 20 called Abraham a prophet, and he's doing altar sacrifices and having angels visit him and prophesying over Jacob and Israel. So, like, it's fallen in line with the same part for the course. The Spirit of God comes out. So, by the way, guys, whenever an angel of God shows up to you, there is no greater manifestation than the Spirit of God showing up to you. Like, they're the embodiment of literal spirit, power, presence of God coming to you with the ability to kill 184,000 people, like with the king of Assyria, right, in the days of Isaiah, or here just open a donkey's mouth.
Yeah.
So, like, they've got incredible power, right?
Yeah.
Because they're full of the Spirit of God, because they've been trusted. That was, for one, why they were made at creation, day one. But two, they're entrusted with that to come and be an agent and representative of that, a conduit of that. So this is why every time we want to point this out so diligently, this cloud that followed the Israelite encampment, the cloud by day, fire by night, and every time that we've been reading for the last 2 months about that cloud dropping down, and then the Spirit of God said to Moses, the angel is talking to Moses. This is, is Exodus 33. God spoke with Elohim face to face. He speaks with God face to face, and this is where has the face to face encounter with this angel, and no one else was allowed to do that, and for the most part, except for like bad circumstances. Yeah, but not just for private counsel, but for bad, like when Aaron and Miriam were called before him in Numbers chapter 10, I think.
Yeah, when it
12.
says the presence of the Lord showed up, it's talking about the angel of the presence.
That's right.
So that's just something to keep
in
mind.
This is a physical person, an embodiment of the Spirit of God. So I don't know, when the Spirit of God came upon him, this isn't obviously the same instance of an angel showing up because the context is a little different. But there's angels that have already been shown up to this guy repetitively in the last few chapters.
He prophesies.
And he's prophesying. Yeah, just like we see the Spirit of God drop in Acts 2, and then Peter starts prophesying.
Right.
So it's the same concept, and it's Old Testament, New Testament. It's the same Father.
Yeah.
It's the same Creator. His ways do not change.
Yeah.
So I hope people are noticing these little moments to break out of this dispensation mindset we've all been taught in our country for so long, because it's absolute bunk. It doesn't line up with Scripture, and there's so many ways to disprove it. We just have to be diligent to go through the Word. Yeah,
and Sean and I fully acknowledge that there's a greater outpouring of the Spirit now, but it's specifically because we have a perfect high priest up in the tabernacle. So please understand, we're not saying nothing has changed since Jesus came.
It's gotten better.
It's gotten better, yeah. He's improved our situation because this had to happen because the Father knew we were going to be dispersed into the nations.
Without a temple.
Right.
Which would have the priests who would also prophesy under the Spirit of the Lord, just like we see Zechariah do and the prophetess Anna do in Luke chapter 1 and 2, just like John the Baptist's dad did. I mean, they all were priests in the temple that prophesied because the Spirit of God came upon them. Just like these prophets were able to do as well. So, so we don't diminish Yeshua and his role as our Messiah, and he's made everything better. Yeah, we love him and we praise him, and he's given us greater access to the Spirit of God, right? But it requires our obedience to his ways, his Torah. Right. So, anything else in this channel, this chapter that sticks out?
It is interesting that Balaam is actually delivering a messianic prophecy.
Yeah.
So the Spirit of God comes upon him, and then he starts talking about things that this wasn't fulfilled when Israel entered into the land. So we have, starting in verse 7, water will flow from his buckets, and his seed will be met by many waters, and his king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings him out of Egypt. He is for him like the horns of the wild ox. He will devour the nations who are his adversaries, and will crush their bones in pieces and shatter them with his arrows. So it goes on, and it's, these are a lot of people will apply a lot of these prophecies we see in the Old Testament books, specifically the first 5, to Israel going into the land.
Right.
But if you guys follow through our whole series of kingdom portions, you'll see there's little bits and pieces of some fulfillment of some of these things when they enter the land, but the larger fulfillment is always in the kingdom.
Right, which is why the second prophecy we see in this chapter, where he goes on to talk about a star shall come forth from Jacob,
Right.
a scepter shall rise from Israel, shall crush through the forehead of Moab, tear down the sons of Set. Edom shall be a possession. So let's just stop right there real quick, because as a point of context, Edom, they're not in the land of Edom right now, okay? Remember, like we talked about last week, they had moved north of Mount Seir, which was originally owned by the Horites, but the Edomites, the sons of Esau, had come in and taken over this area and kicked out the giants of the Horites, the Avim, and the Caphtorim, as Deuteronomy 2 and 3 tells us. So the idea was that Edom was around. So what she was saying was that if this prophecy was just about what's immediately about to happen when they go into the land and start these military campaigns, then this prophecy doesn't make sense, because Edom never got dispossessed.
Right.
They were always around. In fact, they're even still around in the days of the southern kingdom of Judah, when they're invaded by Nebuchadnezzar and they're fleeing from the land of Israel to get out. Edomites attacked them as they were fleeing from Nebuchadnezzar, and this is why you have the book of Obadiah,
Right.
who the father is prophesying through Obadiah, because you did this to my children who were fleeing, I'm going to now I'm going to wipe you out forever, right? And so...
Yeah, because they already got on his list
That's
by
right.
not letting his children go through their
through the
land.
land, yeah.
So they were already in for a timeout, so to
That's
speak.
yeah, and then they attacked his children
Yes,
later,
yeah.
hundreds of years later. So this is why we have this prophecy of end times about a star rising forth from Jacob, crushing the head of its enemies. Edom is mentioned in there with other people that are wiped out forever on the day of the Lord, because they're all descendants, first descendants of these people that have been cohabitating in this land for such a long time,
Right.
which is why earlier it mentioned Agag, right? Which is, we see, like, that's one of the ancient kings that was kind of like an emperor over different kingdoms. We also see Amalek. I think Amalek is mentioned in there, but definitely the Kenites as well as other people. These are people mentioned all the way back in Genesis 10 in the Table of Nations. So these are the first groups of people that came out after the descendants of Noah, and this is why they're being mentioned, because they're mentioned again in prophecy as a central people group in this region on the day of the Lord when he returns and fully clears them all out. And now that whole area of land is a possession for Israel, because that's where the New Jerusalem sits down, and that's our inheritance.
Right.
So that's why we get prophecies like this. Anything else in this chapter, or should we go to 25?
I think we can move to 25.
Okay, guys, so we're going to read just the first 9 verses of 25 for this portion.
While Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. For they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of... While Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab, for they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord was angry against Israel. The Lord said to Moses, "Take all the leaders of the people and execute them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel." So Moses said to the judges of Israel, "Each of you slay his men who have joined themselves to Baal of Peor." Then behold, one of the sons of Israel came and brought to his relatives a Midianite woman, in the sight of Moses, and in the sight of all the congregation of the sons of Israel, while they were weeping at the doorway of the tent of meeting. When Phinehas the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he arose from the midst of the congregation, and took a spear in his hand, and he went up after the man of Israel into the tent, and pierced both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman, through the body. So the plague on the sons of Israel was checked. Those who died by the plague were 24,000.
Okay, thank you, sweetie.
You're welcome.
Okay, more craziness.
Yes. More rebellion.
Craziness. More rebellion.
Outright rebellion.
24,000 people during this event died. Okay, so here's the setup, guys. I forgot to kind of give a setup on the last chapter about how like Balaam was facing Israel and he prophesied, and then like he turned back to Balak, and then he prophesied again. But there was what he actually said in his. He said, "Come and I will tell you what is going to happen with these people and your people," right? But then he starts prophesying. So a lot of people think this is what he was going to counsel him in and tell him in, which is there's reinforcement for that idea as we get to later portions here in a couple of weeks when we get to Numbers chapter 31 or chapter 30, I think, when Moses actually talks about Balaam and we see what happens with this guy because he was with the Midianites,
right?
And who did the Israelites just mess with and do pagan practices with? The Midianites.
Right.
So the reason why we kind of took some time at the beginning of this video to talk about Balaam had proved himself to this point in his life as a prophet of Yahweh and was being faithful through his interaction with Balak. But at the tail end of this, it seems that Balaam does some stuff he shouldn't have done.
Right.
So he's human just like anybody else. You can do really good and then you can still mess up.
Yeah.
So we're going to read about that in weeks to come, so stick with us. But we see the Midianites have this festival and they invite the Israelites over. So isn't this what I was saying earlier, right? They could have just went over and talked with them anyway. Hey, you guys, what are you doing here? Like, how long do you plan to stay? Should we be worried? Or you guys just, are y'all trying to be friendly? Like, what's happening, you know? But so they try to go through this cursing routine. That doesn't work out.
Right.
But instead, now they're like, oh, let's just invite them over. Let's just have some drinks with them and do all these pagan occult practices with them and sacrifice to our gods. And the way that the wording happens here, it makes it look like a large portion. The Israelites begin to play the harlot with the gods of the Midianites, right?
Right.
And then when this is found out, 24,000 of them end up dying as a result. And we'll get into the details in just a minute of what happened in these short 9 verses. But it's only until you read later and you literally have to do the math. Remember, this book is called the Book of Numbers. So in chapter 1 of the Book of Numbers, we get all the tribes numbered, right, by tribe. And then in chapter 26, which is what we're going to be reading next week, we get all the tribes numbered again. So the reason why I'm telling you this week is to make sense of what we're reading here now, because we see in chapter 1 of Numbers and chapter 26 of Numbers, there's a huge drop in the Simeonites. So the tribe of Simeon loses about 24,000 people. It actually loses a little bit more, but when you see the Israelites play the harlot, it doesn't specify. So if you do the math, then you start to realize, oh, I think the Midianites took the hit on that one. I think they're the ones.
The Simeon?
Excuse me, the Simeonites. They're the ones that left and went and partied with the Midianites and then came back. And what happens when they come back?
A plague breaks out.
That's right. How do we know? How do they know what the plague is? How do they know which 24,000 people to judge?
Well, that would go back to defining what the plague is in Leviticus.
Right.
So it would be what we call leprosy.
Right. From Leviticus 14 and 15. We did several episodes on this. This is what, guys, this information is cumulative, right? It builds upon itself, okay? So information we learned back in Leviticus about what plague was and what we tried to show from those episodes. There's 2 different episodes. One's called Lepers in the Kingdom, and the second one's called The Mark of Leprosy. We tried to show from the scriptures, not from the modern day idea of leprosy, but from the scriptural definition of leprosy and what causes it. This is a prime example of why the plague would have broken out.
Right. We see this term, the anger of the Lord burning against the children of Israel. Generally, that's what that means. It means that the plague breaks out because we have the start of the chapter talks about, execute these people so the anger stops burning against them. We don't have it say, and a plague broke out when they returned. But we have in verse 8, so the plague on the sons of Israel was checked. So we know, based on prior context, that if you come into the camp, especially being physically unclean is one thing, but coming in with an unclean heart and being defiled from, worshiping all these pagan gods.
And as we tried to explain from Leviticus 18 through 20, when you go worship with a pagan god, you're not just going to have a meal and kick back some Coronas, right? There's some horrific things that are going on. You're doing bad stuff, bad stuff, right? Gross immorality sexually, and then also forms of cannibalism. Like the Midianites were worshiping Baal. The practices of Baal was detestable, right? Abominations. They were doing bad stuff. So you got these dudes that run out of the camp. I don't know how they didn't think they were going to get seen.
Yeah.
The cloud didn't move. Like the rest of the camp's still there. And these people decided to run out of the camp. And again, remember, this means this is the kids. This is the second generation. Right? This isn't all their parent. They're about to cross the Jordan, fight Jericho, go into the land of promise. The contingent point of context for that was all the first generation that was so rebellious 39 years earlier were all going to die in the desert. And then the second generation, the kids, they were going to go in with Joshua. So that's about to happen. This is like a month or two before that actually happens. So that means this is a new generation that had only grown up, for the most part. I mean, there's obviously some overlap in ages, but for the most part, this would be kids that grew up in this mentality of like, there's an angel of God chilling above us all the time. When it moves, we move. We're in the desert. Our parents tell us that we're going to go into the land of promise at some point. Is this ever going to happen? I don't know. Like that mindset of these kids, and then they get enticed with temptation, right? Apparently there's women involved. Because the women, they're like, that term playing the harlot is a double entendre, guys. So there's like a double meaning to playing the harlots, because that's why this other dude brought a woman back.
Well, what Sean is talking about with the practices that are involved in the Baal worship, if you want a list of some of those things, you can go to Leviticus. I think it's chapters 18 through 20. And it's a big, long list of everything that the inhabitants of that land do that he detests and doesn't want people to do.
That's right.
So, yeah.
And this is the festival that these guys went to partake in. So when they come back in the camp, where the angel of the Lord is, where the holiness of God's power and presence are, and these dudes just participated in a variety of unclean things, they come back stained. They come back and plague breaks out. As it would, because these guys have all been informed. This is how the plague breaks out. So this is how they can know who participated in this, right? Because it's obvious. It's literally written on their face, so to speak, right? So this is why when they're all, and then of course to add insult to injury, while they're mourning for all the people they just had to judge with capital punishment because of this. By the way, this is actually from Deuteronomy chapter 13. So that what they're doing is, there's two different concepts mentioned in Deuteronomy 13. If a single person tries to entice you to worship other gods, that person needs to be stoned. But if a group of people or a city tries to go and worship another god that's a part of the Israel covenant, they have to be killed with the edge of the sword. Okay, so this is why they're all killed with the sword. And then even while they're mourning, Phineas looks up and he sees this straggler. He's probably, it's the next day. He's hungover.
Didn't get the memo, I guess.
Well, he spent all night in the tents of the Midianite woman. And he comes back with her, and they come to find out that she was actually a daughter of someone important. So this is now breaking two different, well, more than two, but just this is now a huge infraction to the covenant that they all were a part of. For one, you're not to take wives of other women of the land. So this dude comes back with the woman. Now she's in his tent. He was with her all night. There's a natural speculation of what's been going on, especially with the practices they were doing. Then, in addition to the practices they were doing that makes them unclean, which is worshiping other gods, false gods, and all the things that they partook in with doing that, but then he's bringing her into their encampment, which is totally, and it's not a slight against the young girl. I'm sure
she was deceived.
She's raised in a deceptive culture anyway. I mean, as the point is, all the circumstances are wrong, and Phineas is legally, according to Torah, justified from Deuteronomy 13 to go and literally take his spear to kill both of them, because this was the only thing that was about to stop the plague, because they both came back unclean. So there's just, the story is wild, right? The story is just wild, and that's why you see the Simeonites, they had like 50,000 people at the beginning of the book of Numbers, and then Numbers 26, which is after this story, they've got like 26,000 people, something like that, or 24,000. Yeah, it's very low, point is. They lost a lot of people. And then could this be why the Simeonites themselves didn't even get their own inheritance? They just were given cities within the inheritance of Judah? because they were just
It's an interesting
continuing to
thought.
prove themselves unfaithful in the 40 years in the wilderness. I don't know. But
Which is sad because Simeon himself, he's the one who went in with Levi and exacted judgment in Shechem.
he was
So
very
how the
zealous.
Simeonites have fallen from, their father's righteousness.
Yeah,
So.
the original, the forefather Simeon himself, he was definitely zealous for the Lord, and he was steadfast with his brother Levi. So yeah, it's sad. It's sad, but okay. So I think that this is a wild story to me. Like this story is even wilder than the donkey.
Yeah.
This Numbers 25 moment, because you've got this used to not make sense to me. This story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like why would Phineas go and kill this guy? Like what in the world? Like where's the that seems wild, right? But remember, guys, context. So what's the context of Phineas? He was a priest. What was one of the jobs of the priest was to be a judge.
Right.
Okay, so this isn't vigilante justice. This is literally the judge watching an infraction that's causing outward physical plague to break out on people who went and violated the covenant they all took and have been defending for the last 40 years with Yahweh, and brings a foreigner stranger into their tent in blatant violation of the covenant. After they had just had to pronounce judgment on all these other people, this guy, who was a part of that group, judgment had already been pronounced on him. So this isn't a random citizen of the Israelites just going and willy-nilly stabbing somebody.
Right.
Judgment. This guy was a part of the rebellious group. Judgment had already been pronounced on all of them. This is the judge.
Yeah.
So he goes, oh, this is just a loose end.
Yeah. It's a
Of
straggler.
the judgment that we had already thought we had completed everything. So legally, in all regards, Phineas is justified.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's a wild story. And I wouldn't have known all that stuff, and I would have taken it out of context like so many people do and thought that this was some sort of weird, murder that was justified when it's not. And Phineas is a judge.
Yeah, we'll see in the wording from the rest of the chapter that we're going to read next week that this is a passage that is famously used to support the concept of Yahweh accepting human sacrifice.
It's not it at all.
Yeah, it's not it at all.
Oh, I
and we'll talk about that when we get to that next week.
That's right. And I forgot about the third thing, which is we'll expound upon next week, which is the girl that he actually brought back was a daughter of one of the nobles of the men of Midian. So this would have bigger implications than him just bringing back like a prostitute.
Right.
This means you go into covenant with Midian, and that was a big no-no. If you actually marry a daughter of one of the leaders of another tribe.
Right,
So,
and if she's executed, that could cause...
start a war.
a war. So.
Which is what we're going to read about
Yeah.
here in a few weeks,
Yeah.
which is they go to war with Midian. So, yeah, it's a huge story, guys, and I love the fact that now that we have a foundation of Torah, if you've been watching our videos with us, hopefully you're seeing this too. It's foundation of all these pieces. Like I said, it's cumulative. They're all coming to play in this story.
Right.
What the plague is, why they can't go away, like why we even get the count of the people in the book of Numbers chapter 1, why they're doing these censuses, why they're told back in Genesis day not to marry a foreigner into Israel, what that means, we're getting all these things culminated. What does a priest do besides ministering in the temple? He's a judge of the law, which means he actually is the one that has to go put the knife in somebody, right? This is what we saw the Levites do in Exodus 32 when they started worshiping the Baal at the base of Mount Sinai. So there's just all of it's building up to your understanding in this moment. So if you haven't been reading the Torah or studying the previous concepts, you get to Numbers 25 and you don't even know what you're reading. You don't know what you're looking at. So that's why this is fun.
Yeah.
For word nerds like myself, this is fun.
Yeah, it's amazing how context makes everything make so much sense. When I was an unbeliever, if I wasn't familiar with that story of the scriptures, but I certainly would have taken it and used it as an example of the big meanie in the sky as I used to see this character in this book. But I'll tell you, when I first came to Christ and I first started reading the Bible, I started in Genesis. I wasn't programmed by any religion growing up to not start anywhere but the beginning of the book. So as I read through and got through to Exodus and started reading about the plagues, it was making sense to me why judgment was just on the Egyptians. Whereas before, in my prior, spiritually dead mindset or however you want to call it, I just saw him, doing mean things to Egyptians. I didn't see justice and judgment and legality and and actually them bringing it upon themselves. So it's kind of the same thing here with this story, where it doesn't make, just on its surface, if you were to just pull that story out and show somebody without any of the background, understanding the laws going on, understanding how much they've been testing him and rebelling against him, there seems to be no justification for him to have a whole bunch of them executed like that. But with the build-up, I mean, even now as a believer, even if I didn't have all this foundation in the Torah of understanding what's going on, I would still be able to accept this was his judgment, and I'm not going to question that. But it helps to have all this context surrounding it, and then I can actually explain that to someone who might have a problem with that story. So,
yeah, good point, sweetie. Yeah, it really helps you to know the front of the book.
It really helps your apologetics, guys. It really helps you be able to reason with a person who has that mindset that I used to have, that, oh, this is just a big meanie in the sky, and he's just always mad at everybody. You know, it really helps to be able to understand the actual surrounding context of what's going on.
When, in fact, the reality is, all these instructions he gave them, he told them, if you keep these, you will live.
Right. Yeah.
These are for your well-being.
Yeah.
It's Deuteronomy 18. These are for your well-being and benefit. So it's just, that's Deuteronomy 6. But anyway, the point is, it's all for our good. And it's only when the rebellious try to go against it. And then remember, these are people that willingly went into covenant.
Right.
Like, these weren't people that were coerced. They weren't manipulated. They weren't held at gunpoint or spear point, whatever. they weren't held against their will to say, you go into covenant with Yahweh. No, they willingly said, all that you say, we will do. And they got sprinkled with the blood. They went in, they had the covenant meal. They did this. They said, we'll be faithful. We'll do it. So, and remember, Pentecost, Shavuot, every year is a renewal of the covenant. Yep. Guys, if these people at any point in the 38, 40 years, if they just wanted to leave, they could leave. They weren't held hostage. Obviously, this is their family. They're more enticed to stay. But these aren't people that are just saying, if you leave, that we're going to try to kill you. No, they could have just left. If they didn't want to be in the covenant, they didn't want to believe the promises that were given to them or even follow along with their family, whatever, they could have picked up shop and just left. But instead, what do we see? We see them trying to be rabble-rousers, them trying to do mutinies to take all the people back with them to leave, like in the days of Korah, right, Numbers chapter 16. We see other moments where they just want to go against the instructions of the covenant, yet stay with the community.
Right.
Which does what? Which does Deuteronomy 13, entices others to worship false gods. So, like, they don't want to just straight leave. They want to not obey the rules, but have all the benefits.
Right.
You see what I mean? So this is where the Father has to enforce justice. Same thing that's going to happen when they get in the land. Is the same rules that apply while they're in this moving camp. So anyway, our first pairing that we want to go to is in Isaiah 11. And this particular pairing is a fun one. So I'll just read this real quick. So here in verse 1, then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from its roots will bear fruit. The Spirit of Yahweh will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and strength, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahweh. He will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees, nor make a decision by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he will judge the poor, and decide with fairness for the afflicted of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Also righteousness will be the belt about his loins, and faithfulness the belt about his waist. And the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little boy will lead them. Also the cow and the bear will graze, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child will put his hand on the viper's den. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of Yahweh, as the waters cover the sea. Then in that day the nations will resort to the root of Jesse, who will stand as a signal for the peoples. His resting place will be glorious. Then it will happen on that day that Yahweh will again recover the second time with his hand the remnant of his people who will remain from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. He will lift up a standard for the nations and assemble the banished ones of Israel, and will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. All right, so there's Isaiah 11, first 12 verses. Beautiful promise of the millennial reign.
Yeah.
At the holy mountain, animals are at peace. They're not attacking mankind. Babies laying near the adder's hole, near the snake holes. Young boys are leading what we would consider vicious animals today, but yet they're led by a young boy. They're not attacking anybody. And spirit of wisdom, understanding, strength, knowledge, all resting on the Messiah, who's called this the stem of Jesse, the root of Jesse. This is obviously messianic prophecy. And the nations will resort to the Messiah. This is what actually is prophesied about. The Gentiles will hope in the Messiah. They will hope in Jesus, as Paul talks about in Romans 15. So this is the idea that this is a beautiful moment of all the people are regathered, right? As verses 11 and 12 tell us, that from a second time he'll regather them from the nations everywhere, from the four corners of the earth. And this is a much bigger gathering than just the Exodus coming out of Egypt, right? This is the resurrection. Where everyone is, this is Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 4, where everyone is gathered from wherever they are under the heaven. They're all gathered together to bring to his holy mountain. There's only one time that happens. That's at the first resurrection event that happens on the day of the Lord. We're given our incorruptible bodies. We're raised to eternal life and taken to the New Jerusalem. So the point is, these animals are with the boy, or the snake is like the weaned child, which means the very small child at the age of 1 to 3, and he's playing near the viper's den, and there's no harm to them. There's no problem there, right? So we've got the nations are drawn to this place. There's perfect peace within this place. There's animals within this place, which is a beautiful thing.
Their nature has changed.
Their nature has changed. That's right. So we've got just to me like some of the same semblances and parallels that we saw from this portion in Numbers with Balaam's donkey, as well as these other nations that are looking at Israel, and even though they should just kind of back off and not mess with them, they're drawn to them. Obviously, unfortunately, it's for bad reasons. The nations will be drawn to the New Jerusalem for good reasons, which is the inhabitants, the resting place of Israel, the city where Israel will reside as an inheritance. But and of course, the Messiah, Yeshua of Nazareth, will be the king within the kingdom. And I just think it's this beautiful little, to me, it's like a beautiful little parallel of, you've got the children of Israel, they're moving closer to the promised land, and they're stirring up all the people around them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, because they can't handle it, right? Because what Israel, the encampment of the Israelites, with the angel of the presence that's with them, with the power of God in the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, that whole concept, all that represents God's justice, God's provision, God's love, God's law, right? Which is God's way of living that these other people are not trying to live by. And so they're being stirred up as just a natural recourse, because this is what happens, right? When they see righteousness, they see a standard coming towards them, which that's why it says the standard will be raised as a signal for the peoples in this particular passage here, because that's usually representative of an army.
Right.
So as we read back in earlier Numbers, the Israelites moved in a specific military formation, if I could put it like that. So this is why when you have Balaam being taken by the king Balak to the high hill to look down at the encampment, from a high altitude, look down at the encampment of Israelites spread out over the land, they're seeing a military formation. So this rightly kind of stirs a little bit of fear in the king, right? So that's just some interesting parallels there. So I think it's a beautiful passage.
Yeah.
Do you want to read the next one in Zechariah?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
Thus says the Lord of hosts, it will yet be that peoples will come, even the inhabitants of many cities. The inhabitants of one will go to another, saying, let us go at once to entreat the favor of the Lord, and to seek the Lord of hosts. I will also go. So many peoples and mighty nations will come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem, and to entreat the favor of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, in those days 10 men from all the nations will grasp the garment of a Jew, saying, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you.
Well, thank you, sweetie.
Sure.
Okay, so here's kind of another beautiful parallel, right? In millennial reign time, we've got the same concept happening. You've got people during this time hearing and seeing, oh wait, God's with you. You're a quote unquote Jew, which is interesting. It's kind of funny, but guys, remember what Paul tries to explain to us in Romans chapter 2. A person is not a Jew just because they're born in that descendancy, that lineage. They're a Jew who's one who's circumcised in their heart to God. So this is where the Pharisees and the party of circumcision were trying to kind of abscond that term,
right,
and make it more about being about you're born of Judah, you're born of this lineage, you're born of Israel, so you're a Jew and you'll always be a Jew. Yet Paul tries to say, look, there's people who are not Jews, even though they're born as a Jew because their hearts are not circumcised to God. So they're just, a Jew in name only, if you could put it like that, So, which is why he says in Romans chapter 9 that those who are born from Israel are not everyone is Israel who comes from Israel, right? So this whole idea of Israel is your heart to God? Is that something you're actively trying to adopt his ways and be in covenant with him according to the definitions of the covenant? This makes you a quote-unquote Jew. Right. So technically, anyone who's a believer in Jesus Christ and is actually trying to be obedient to his ways, you're a Jew. As far as if we could lovingly use that term, right? I just think it's interesting. So yeah, these people are wanting to know God. They're wanting to go after him. And this is an interesting idea that we see in the millennial reign. Next, real quick, let's read more about the millennial reign. But yet, it's about the Garden of Eden. And so we're going to be in Jubilees chapter 3, and we're going to read, just real quick here, what verses are we going to look at? This is going to be in 28 and 29. So Jubilees 3, 28 and 29. And on that day was closed the mouth of all beasts, and of cattle, and of birds, and whatever walks, and of whatever moves, so they could no longer speak, for they had all spoken one with another with one lip, with one tongue. And he sent out of the Garden of Eden all flesh that was in the Garden of Eden, and all flesh was scattered according to its kinds, and according to its types, unto the places which had been created for them. Okay, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, evolution definitely doesn't fit into there because they didn't go to places and then adapt to them. There were places that were created for them.
That's right. But they weren't there initially. They were initially in the garden with Adam and Eve for 7 years, as the book of Jubilees says, and then scattered when Adam and Eve. Why? Because they were under the authority of Adam. Right. So if Adam got kicked out, they couldn't be in there without authority, right? So yeah, it works perfectly, but the idea is that it's not only with what we read in Revelation 11, or Isaiah 11, but if the animals could all speak in the garden, but when they get out of the garden they can't speak, it's our strong inclination that when we're all back in the garden in Isaiah 11, the New Jerusalem, they'll speak again. Yeah. Which is going to be great.
Yeah, I think it'll be awesome. Yeah. That's actually one of the biggest things I look forward to.
Yeah, because I think monkeys are hilarious. Like they're probably like God's comedians running around cracking jokes, and little lemurs, anyway. So and I want to hear a beaver's voice. I bet it's adorable, so anyway, but did you notice it said even the birds, obviously parrots try to talk today, they can make the sounds. We know it's possible.
They can be trained. Yeah, they can be trained to use human language.
And according to what we read here in Numbers 22, they have intelligent thought, even reasoning capabilities. Yeah. So this is a beautiful thing. It's hilarious and fun to think about at the same time. So yeah. All right, our last pairing we want to go to real quick is going to be out of the book of Matthew, and we're going to be looking at Jesus talking about some of these concepts as well. So it's going to be in Matthew chapter 13, and we're going to start with verse 10 and just go through 16 real quick. So here in verse 10, and the disciples came to him and said, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" Jesus answered them, "To you it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been granted. For whoever has, to him more shall be given, and he who will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because while seeing they do not see, and while hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand." In their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled, which says, "You will keep on hearing, but will not understand. You will keep on seeing, but will not perceive. For the heart of this people has become dull. With their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, because they see, and your ears, because they hear. For truly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it." Okay, so it's Matthew 13. Yeshua is trying to explain to the disciples, hey guys, what you're hearing, what he's getting at is the disciples getting to interact with him. Right? That's what he's saying. I mean, prophets and righteous men desired what you guys are getting to have and experience right now, to see and hear me talking, because they all prophesied of him previously, right? And so I think it's beautiful because we actually see Balaam talk about this in Numbers 24, and this would be actually in verses 16 and 17, where he says, "The oracle of him who hears the words of God and knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty falling down, yet having his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come forth from Jacob, a scepter shall rise from Israel. So he goes on to explain about the Messiah some more, right? This is Yeshua saying that these prophets and righteous men, they desire to see what you guys are getting to interact with for 3 years as he walked around and did his ministry. What a beautiful blessing, right?
Yeah.
So it's beautiful because when the kingdom comes, we'll all get to see Yeshua. We'll all get to interact. Even the nations that are drawn to the New Jerusalem that live encamped around outside of it, they're going to get to see him speak and watch him walk around and do righteousness and heal them. Right? It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful concept. This is why every time he was preaching and teaching and healing people, everywhere he went during his ministry, he would say, the kingdom of God has come to you. It's at hand, right? Because he embodies everything that we're going to experience during the millennial reign and everything the nations that survive the day of the Lord are going to experience when they come to the amazing city and see the Messiah on the ground. So it's just it's beautiful. It's beautiful hope, guys.
Yeah.
Give your heart to Jesus.
Yeah, we'll finally get to ask him what he bent over and wrote in the sand with his finger.
Yeah, he'll tell us all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, just how he spits in mud and makes eyes see. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like all that fun stuff. He'll get to explain it all. So, guys, thank you for joining us. Another fun Kingdom Portions for us anyway. We get excited about this. And thank you for joining us. Please put your comments down below. If you haven't already subscribed, do that. Hit the bell for notifications so you are aware when we put out new videos. And we thank you for being here for us, and we hope that's been edifying to you. Sweetie, is there any concluding remarks?
Same as always, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, thanks for sticking with us. And I just always like to remind everybody that our only goal, our only motive here for everything that we do on this channel is to help you guys understand the Word so that you can go and help others understand the Word. Because this is the only thing that can fulfill that great commission of going and making disciples. We have to be able to explain to our disciples what the gospel of the kingdom is. And the only way to really understand the gospel of the kingdom is to keep everything in its proper context, because context creates comprehension. So we don't want you to just be able to repeat things. We want you to really be able to comprehend the Word so you can go and expound on it all on your own, and you don't need to just give someone a link to a video or do a copy-paste list of verses. We want you to really be able to have the recall that Sean and I have, and just really have the understanding that's going to help you, help others understand it as well. So we appreciate you guys, and if you want to come hang out with us on Facebook, we're definitely there quite often. We just love you guys.
Well said.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us, guys. We hope to see you back here next week. Shabbat Shalom.
See you guys. Have a good week.